Compañeros, welcome to the SQL Data Partners podcast, the podcast dedicated to SQL Server-related topics, which is designed to help you become familiar with what's out there, how you might use those features, or ideas on how you might apply them in your environments. I am Carlos L. Chacon.
And I am Steve Stedman. We are two data professionals trying to help others get a better handle on their database environments, either through this podcast, our training, or our consulting practice. Thanks for joining us on the SQL Trail. Welcome to the show.
SQL Data Partners.
Okay, welcome, compañeros. Episode 83. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Carlos. Yep, with episode 83 today, the topic... Hey, Carlos. Yep, with episode 83 today, the topic is going to be on data visualization, and our guest is Jonathan Stewart.
Yeah, Jonathan has brought some insights. He was kind of in our panel in Columbus and then in Pittsburgh and just said some interesting things. And so I wanted to have him on and give his thoughts about some topics. He's kind of in the BI space. He's the owner of SQLox LLC and does a lot with analytics. Yeah, his topic was data visualizations. And I kind of thought at first, I'm like, okay, this is going to be different. And it's definitely that. And kind of the way he attacks this problem, again, maybe not so much looking at it from here's the technology that you should be using, but more here's how your presentations, what they say about your organizations and how your users interpret them.
Yep. I know I definitely enjoyed the conversation there, and that there's a lot of things that he brought up that were different than anyone has ever, or anyone that I've ever talked to about data visualizations has brought up. And I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing on Jonathan, I met him at SQL Pass Summit in Seattle last year in 2016, and sat down at the game night that they organized one night, and we were playing cards, and he taught me how to play spades.
Ah, very nice.
Yep.
A regular card shark, right? So don't go up against Jonathan.
Exactly, yep. So do we have some compañero shout-outs this week?
We do. We want to shout out to Paul Stanton. He reached out to us on episode 80, talking about containers, the one we had with Andrew. Paul worked for Windocs and is actually the company that's helping Andrew kind of do that SQL Server in the lower versions, and thought that we did a good job. He's happy that we're talking about containers and looking to help other people. Yeah, so we put out a kind of a long overdue explanation of if you didn't go back and listen to episode 0, which was from August of 2015, kind of why we use the word compañero and kind of where that came from, the genesis of that. And so we put out a video about that. And so Kevin suggested that we all listen to the SQL podcast every week. And so for those of you who are just joining us, welcome. For those of you who've been listening for a while, thanks for tagging along. We do appreciate it. And we hope that you've enjoyed the additions and changes that we've made since we started.
Yep. And with that, if anyone's ever confused by compañero and the way we're using it, you can always go to YouTube and search on SQL compañero, and you'll get a video that Carlos put together that explains it all.
Yeah. Very good. Let's see. Our show notes for today's episode will be available at SQLDataPartners.com.
You'll get a video that Carlos put together that explains it all.
Yeah. Very good. Let's see. Our show notes for today's episode will be available at SQLDataPartners.com/visualization. And now it's time for SQL Server in the News. So we started doing this little portion of the episode, if you will, and it's been received well. Lots of people talking about it. We were on this really rapid pace. Microsoft was releasing stuff all the time. 2016, the Connect stuff was they were always releasing something. And while they just couldn't keep that up, right? And so they continued to release things fairly quickly. I don't think anybody's going to say that they're slouching by any stretch of the imagination, but they don't necessarily have something new and noteworthy every week. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that people are doing with SQL Server that we can't share with you. And so we found a couple of things, including a video and a song.
Different 2016 and song you'll find this video and you can listen to it all the way through. But interesting stuff. And I know that there's a lot of times people make kind of a silly song out there and talking about different things, and you wonder if they really know what they're talking about. But listening to the detail that he has included in this, boy, he knows what's in Sequel 2016, I'll tell you that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's really catchy to listen to, right? So we won't play the whole thing, but let's listen to a little segment now.
This just might be Microsoft's biggest lead in technology. SQL Server 2016. This just might be Microsoft's biggest lead in technology.
Okay, come on.
SQL Server 2016.
June 1st, 2016. That was the day it came on the scene. Now you may call it SQL Server 16, but I refer to it as version 13. First of all, you can have more cores. Infinity if you're able to afford. High availability, even went higher. Advanced OLTP in memory. Security. High availability, even went higher. Advanced OLTP in memory. Security with always encrypted.
So again, kind of mixing of talents, right? So what he does for a living versus what he likes to do on the weekends, if you will. And so I thought it was interesting enough to share with you compañeros.
Yep. Now, other music sequel in the news is something interesting that the SQL Server Radio guys did on episode 64 of their show. You want to tell us about that, Carlos?
Yeah, so I've always been a little bit jealous of these guys. They were one of the folks that I was listening to and kind of trying to model, if you will, when I thought about putting the podcast together. And they've been absolutely fearless. So Guy Glancer, Matan Yunman, they're at SQL Server Radio. And so Guy is someone who he actually dressed up in the Superman costume and presented at Summit 2015 for his presentation. And they've done some very, very interesting things on their show. And one of them we wanted to share with you here today.
This is SQL Radio. You might want to listen to this show. Don't worry. Be happy. This is show number 64. You might want to listen more. Don't worry.
Wow. Now, we're not going to steal all their thunder. Yeah, you're going to have to go back and listen to the opening there of episode 64, even if you don't listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
But super funny. I found myself laughing.
Talk about raising the bar in the SQL podcast space. Yeah, we've got something to try and live up to there, I think.
No, that's right. And they kind of inject a certain energy and enthusiasm there. You know those guys are having fun when they're recording.
Yes, and I think that even though we're having fun, I don't know how to show it through music.
Yeah, when I suggested it, I listened to this and I said, "Hey, Steve, how about singing in our podcast?" It wasn't quite met with the same enthusiasm.
Yeah, maybe for like when we get to podcast number 200, we could do a song on that one.
Yes, that's right. And I have noticed the last couple of times they've done some advertisements or pictures or whatever, they've had a certain drink in their hands there. And I think that might be helping the creative juices flow a little bit.
Oh, do we need drink service in the SQL Data Partners recording studio?
Yeah. That might help the creativity factor a little bit there.
Nice. Well, I'll tell you, the guys on SQL Server Radio, they do an awesome job, and it is one of my favorite podcasts outside of our own. So nice work, guys. Yes,
thank you for making us laugh there. Yep. And kind of pushing us to think about other ways that we can engage. We've tried to do different things, even SQL Server in the news. And sometimes you get feedback and people are like, yeah, that's great. And sometimes you get nothing. And you're like, does that mean people hate it? Do they just not like it? They just don't take the time to say anything? And so if nothing else, we wanted to let them know that we think it's funny and that it's great. So
Yep. All right. Now on to the conversation with Jonathan Stewart.
Jonathan, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you having me on. It's a great honor.
Yes, always interested in chatting with you. And ultimately, our topic of discussion today is data visualizations. Now, this isn't necessarily a reporting discussion, but ultimately, I guess the way that we maybe present and potentially consume report, or as we say, data visualizations. Let's jump into that. And I guess you have an interesting story. Why is this an important topic for you?
Well, first off, one of the issues that I've always seen is that whenever we look at data visualization, first thing we think about is a report, a chart, the tool, whether it's Excel or Power BI, Tableau, Click, doesn't matter. And that's
SSRS. A lot of our people are using SSRS.
Right. Yeah, reporting services, and that's how we see it. But one of the problems, what we end up with the problems of, what's the report right and stuff like that too, and all those problems that we end up having with it can be hedged up front if we look at it from a different view. So I begin to look at things from the focal point, the first point, look at it from the problem, and then begin to look at it as a story versus just, a report. And, how can we get the story better? How can we tell the story better? I've always been a psychology junkie. So I've always loved stuff like how does colors make us feel? How does, things like that. So all these things begin to build in me about visualization. So I begin to see certain reports, why pie charts suck, right? So we can always laugh at that. But, so I got to see all these things as I was building out my career and building my focus. So it became my interest. And so it's a huge interest to me, and everything from how we perceive the world, color blindness, all kind of stuff like that begin to take shape. And I got to see it. And this is just me in general. As I learn more, I want to share more with people. Right. So it was like, oh, this is amazing. Let me share this with them. This is amazing. So then it became, somebody was like, you should just speak about it. So that's actually one of the things that prompted me.
There you go. Help us here, because we've had discussions on this show about many of the different reporting options that are available to us, right? And ultimately, while there are, I guess, different needs, that's why there are so many different tools. In what ways are we fumbling when we actually talk about the presentation layer, if you will?
One of the major issues that I see in the problem in visualization is that, the current tools are sold as, self-service BI, self-service
layer, if you will.
One of the major issues that I see in the problem in visualization is that, the current tools are sold as, self-service BI, self-service this, self-service pumping your gas and stuff like that. Well, self-service. And the pumping your gas joke is something that Edward Tufte, in one of his blogs, he made a comment about. He's like, he has a huge issue with people like ClickView, Tableau, even Power BI saying it is, it's just this. You have our tool, you can make this. And, he's like, it's not like pumping gas. You can't just take data and just show it, because if it has no context, if you don't know what it means, then it's still just, a bad visualization.
Gotcha. So we need to be able to better represent what the data means when we present it.
Right. So one of my focuses is that, I bring into it, like when I go to a client and they've never seen things like this before, I actually storyboard before I even open up a tool. So I'll go and I'll interview, if I get a request, I need this. So I'll go and I'll sit with this report. So before I even open up a tool, because one of the things too that we do, when we open up a tool, as soon as we start coding something or writing something, whether it's 5 minutes or an hour or 5 days, a week, whatever, if it's wrong, we really don't want to change it because it's our baby, right? Like we don't want to change it. We're writing a SOAR procedure. We kind of really don't want to just throw it away. We want to modify it.
Sure.
So, even before I even get to opening any tool, it doesn't matter what the tool is. I want to make sure that I understand the problem.
Yep. So one of the things you mentioned there was Tufte, and I know I've looked at some of his books and I've seen some truly amazing visualizations. And I know one of the disconnects that I've had is going from here's the tools we're given, SSRS or whatever it may be that we're using, to how do we get from that to some of these amazing things that you're seeing there. And that's where, even with Power BI, there's a lot more features in there, but to really go to some of the stuff that he's shown, it's a big jump.
Right. And I think that one of the things that as I can get more people to think up
to some of these amazing things that you're seeing there. And that's where, even with Power BI, there's a lot more features in there, but to really go to some of the stuff that he's shown, it's a big jump.
Right. And I think that one of the things that as I can get more people to think about it in terms of a story and storyboarding, you'll get to that. So you'll be able to see, what the problem we're trying to solve, who's the audience, what action are we trying to take? And then what type of mechanism? Are we doing PowerPoint, Power BI? Then understanding your tone and stuff like that. Are we showing success or failure? Then once you have all these questions answered, then you can say, okay, how can I display that properly? And then you can start getting to those amazing visualizations that Tufte and Few and all those people show. Then you can start showing those things. But once you have all that stuff answered up front, then you can solve that. I think one of the problems is that we try to jump to that. We say, oh, okay, I think I can show that in this amazing, histograph.
I've got some data. Now let me just throw it in this visualization tool.
Right. And try to make it look pretty.
Exactly.
And then it ends up not for you. And over the course of a week, they have 10,000 tries. And over the 10,000 tries, let's say they find 147 pieces of gold. And so now somebody says, I want a report of that. And you say, okay, well, what do you want in the report? Do you want me to show you all 10,000 tries? You may not want to see all 10,000 tries. You may only want to see the 141 successes. But, you may be somebody who's developing the tools that did the try. So yeah, you do want to see all 10,000 tries, so which is the right answer, and a lot of times too, when somebody gives us a report requirement, it may be 3 reports that we may have to develop, 2 reports, but we don't know that until we actually go back and actually interview and do this and figure out who the audience is and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, it's not just show us the data.
Right. And we've talked about this before on this show and kind of maybe the new wave, the new technologist. Another differentiator is that I think a lot of times, like you say, we're technologists. I have the data. I'm going to toss it into the report. I've done my job kind of a thing. The new wave, or what I think executives are looking for, we've had CEOs on this show talking about what they're looking for in data people. And they want people that understand the data. They want people that understand the business, right? Why are we collecting data this certain way? And I think this could then be a major differentiator to be able to go in and say, well, you know what? I am the guy who developed, to use your Gold Rush example, I understand how to develop this gold developing software, or, process or whatever. Therefore, I can give you better insights into that 10,000 or know how to display it, that kind of a thing.
Right. And then too, knowing who your audience is for too, because if you're just doing a report for another person who's going to be out there panning for gold, that's a whole different report than your CEO.
Sure.
So, understanding all those things up front before you ever open up the tool will help ensure that your visualization becomes useful, because at the end of the day, that's the whole point of it.
So one of the things that I see working with clients, and specifically around reports, is that oftentimes you'll get a request that comes in from a customer of the client, or an internal customer of the client that says, take an existing report that's like, I don't know, a simple grid type report, and add to it or modify it or do these things to it. And oftentimes what we run into there is that people know what they've seen and they know how to ask for alterations to what they've seen, but they don't necessarily know how to ask for what they're really looking for. Do you run into that?
I do. And I have a couple tricks that I'll share. One of the things that I do is, like you said, you see that a lot. You say, hey, we have report A. We want to extend report A with this, this, and this. Once I have all this, can I make a 1-sentence summary of it? Can I make a 3-minute story of that? And then if I take what I have there and I give it back to them and they say, no, wait. That's not really what I want. And that's what you'll get when you start engaging the user, putting stuff into a story form, because we understand stories because we like stories. That's just who we are. And so once you start explaining that to them, they say, oh, wait, that's not it. Because one of the things that we always run across is that we think we know something, and somebody may have knowledge that we don't have. So it'll be, I think they know that, and it happens with all of us. We'll say, do such and such. And we think that everybody may know all of the answers and they don't. So in putting it into a story form and presenting it back, then we say, okay, it's this and this. They say, oh, wait, I forgot to tell you such and such. So you're prompting them to be able to give you more information as well before you ever modify that chart.
And you're not assuming that they know something that they may not know, or you're working on different assumptions.
Right. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what kind of visualization you're doing, whether you're doing an infograph, a simple chart, stack bar chart, histogram, it doesn't matter. You should be able to summarize that in words real quickly to whoever's presenting it to you. And they should say, yeah, that's exactly what I want. Whether it's the granular level of it too, everything should be able to be summarized quickly to your user back and say, okay, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And then you can open your tool.
Sounds like some great advice there. You mentioned psychology earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about how?
Just color, right? Use what colors you're using. And this goes back to my storyboarding. Again, you see everything comes back to storyboarding, right? Because that's like, I should have everything done before I ever open a tool. Even the colors picked out should be done before I ever pick a tool. So you go back to like the tone of your visualization. Did your company lose $10 million last quarter? Do you really want to show that with happy colors and stuff like that? Maybe, right? Right? Maybe. You probably don't want the whole report to be red either. The color connotations of red, how red makes us feel. We have innate biases to it. So like the color red, has the connotations of power and energy and war and, strength and stuff like that. So if we use it in that aspect, then that's great. But it can also, be violent and brutal, overbearing, anger, right? So it's all about understanding the color that we use when we're using it. You see the psychology of it in things like company logos. Like there's a reason why the majority of company logos have red, blue, or white in it. I don't know if you were white. when we're using it. You see the psychology of it in things like company logos. Like there's a reason why the majority of company logos have red, blue, or white in it. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but the majority of company logos have red, blue, and white because they want to show, the red, they want to show power, passion, strength, desire. The companies that have white want to show, purity and innocence and simplicity, and the blue, like Microsoft, obviously, right? They want to show confidence and intelligence and trust and stuff like that. So they're already doing these things, showing you these type of things. Even in movies, there's certain directors and stuff that use color to show feeling because we automatically have these innate feelings of color when we see them. So not going too far from the subject of visualization, we want to go back to and make sure that we're showing that we're using the right color. We're not using green because we like the color green. We're using green because we want to show, nature or, down to earth growth, vitality. But we got to be careful with it too, because it can also be, be devious and, selfish and greedy. The whole meaning of the report.
It makes me think. I worked for a company years ago where one of the marketing directors had basically a rule that nowhere on the company website would green ever be used. And it was one of those, I never understood why. But thinking about some of the things you're talking about here, maybe they had some kind of, psychology behind not using green, and they failed to share that with the development team.
Well, what was the industry they were in?
It was in sort of self-service websites, like back in around 2000 to 2005, sort of early on.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah, because I was trying to think of what kind of negative meanings green would have for something like that. And I can't, that there had to have been something else, that they were thinking about. But yeah, there's all kind of reasons why people want to do that. And then you get the stuff that's like, one of the funny things is like the color orange. Orange is historically a color that you either love or hate, but kids are drawn to it. Like that's why Nickelodeon's logo is orange, right? And it signifies like happiness and stuff like its logo is orange, right? And it signifies like happiness and stuff like that. So you get things like, Amazon's logo and stuff too. So,
well, so it's funny you mentioned that because, people would ask me growing up, like what my favorite color was, and I could never really pick one, but I always enjoyed like orange candies and, flat flavor. So I chose orange.
Yeah, because kids love orange. And this is one of those things where, people don't think about it until you're like, oh yeah, you know what? That's true. That's true.
That's interesting. There's one other area that we want to jump into, but I guess I want to maybe stop and say, well, look, so all of this sounds well and good. And I think, yes, it makes sense. Like, yes, we want to present the best data because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our, users are happy, that people are understanding the information well. But all of a sudden, this sounds like a lot of work. An additional task that I have to then now take on in addition to this. So where's my easy button, right?
Okay, so here's your easy button for you. Preventing rework, number one. Because at the end of the day, if your visualization is wrong, you have to do it again, then you just wasted everything, right? So don't think of it as, I have to do this extra work. Think of it as you're doing it to prevent extra work. So if you develop a framework, you develop, your own storyboard, and you get your stuff there, you develop your go-to 5 questions. Because for me, like I have probably 8 to 10 charts and graphs that I use all the time. So I already have those in my head. I already know I can throw stuff into them and just go with them. So I don't have to think about those because I already have them. And if anybody who's done reporting, I'm sure you guys both have your favorite charts and graphs that you like. So you already have those. So you don't really have to develop those because you already have them and know them.
Well, I was going to say, I'm showing the lazy man that I am, right? I mean, 99% of the time, I'm taking the default. Right? The default theme, whether that's in Word, right? Whether that's in so whatever the chart is. I mean, like Excel might give me a couple of options, but I'm just like, okay, I'm going to, take that one. And then if they don't like it, then I'll change it, right? I mean, I admit that. And I think maybe to your point, that idea of developing a process around how you're going to create them and then, coming up with some of your favorites, right? Once you've kind of gotten a couple of wins there, you can go back and make that process a little bit faster.
I'll write a blog post of like, let's say 5 questions, a quick process that, that a professional can go through and, may take them 20 minutes to gather these answers that'll help frame, a quick storyboard to build into their platform. It'd be basic that you can extend it yourself, but I'll create a couple of questions, that you can have and take in that way to help you get to that point so that you can eliminate a lot of the rework that we typically have. I'll do that and put that on my blog.
If you get us the link to that, we can include that on the show notes, which will be at sqldatapartners.com/visualization. Okay, so now that we've talked about colors, what about people who are colorblind? How do you handle that?
That's actually a big, big thing. And it's actually dear to me too, because I grew up with people in my family who suffer from color value. We had them or actually experienced them, day to day life. Like one of the things is cakes, birthday cakes. I remember a birthday cake. We were doing a birthday cake and we had to actually stop and think about the color difference between the cake and the letters on it, because the person we were creating the cake for wouldn't be able to see the difference. And I was probably like 8 or 9 years old. And I was like, wow. So at an early age, it was impactful for me to be able to see that.
What are the stats on color blindness?
I believe it's something like 1 out of every 8 men are colorblind. 1 out of every 12 men, so 8%. So yeah, 1 out of every 12 men and 1 out of every 200 women in general are colorblind. So, if you take a standard, let's say a Sequel Saturday, with 30 people in the room, there's 3 people at least in that room that are colorblind. And then too, there's not just one type of colorblindness. There's multiple spectrums. It's the color vision deficiency. There's different types of things: deuteranopia, protanopia, and tritanopia. Those are the 3 major ones.
Sure.
But they're like green cone deficiencies. And one of the things that we hear too when we think of the term color blindness, we think that the person can't see the color they can't see red, but they lose the whole spectrum. So somebody who's has green deficiency, they lose the whole green spectrum. They could lose the whole red spectrum. And one of the things that I show in one of my talks is that, and I do this purposely, like I said, it's dear to me, is I show people what other people see, because until we actually see how other people see things, we can't really empathize with them. I'll take a picture and I'll show it in the different types of spectrums. I'll say, okay, this is how we see the world. Then I'll show this is how they see the world. This is how this person sees the world. And it's like, oh my God, I didn't think about that. There's actually some cool things that we can do though. Off the bat, we can immediately we can use shading and gradients, which are tools that are already available to us to be able to show differences. We can avoid using reds and greens together when possible. But there's other tools too, like one is the Color Lab. And I will give you guys this link so you can put it with the notes, the Color Lab. And the Color Lab is actually pretty cool because you can go through and immediately, we can use shading and gradients, which are tools that are already available to us to be able to show differences. We can avoid using reds and greens together when possible. But there's other tools too, like one is the Color Lab. And I will give you guys this link so you can put it with the notes, the Color Lab. And the Color Lab is actually pretty cool because you can go through and, you take your company's color palette, because that's another thing too. A lot of companies have color palettes that, they have to put their reports in these palettes. So, they're probably
criteria, sure.
Right. So they're probably better off using shading and gradients. But you can put the colors in here. You can go through and change the color spectrum, the CVD spectrum, and see how people see these colors truly. And then there's another site, colorblindness.com. It's called Coblis, it's the colorblind simulator. And so what I do is when I get done with my visualization, whether it's reporting services, Power BI, Tableau, it doesn't matter. I'll screenshot it and I'll upload it there and I'll look through it through their simulator to make sure that I can still see what I want to show. Does my visualization still show the story that I want to tell? So, am I losing tone because everything's becoming datafied? You're going to have more and more people depending on data. And the one thing that you don't want to do right now, it's not written into the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, but I can see it being used, later on, because if somebody says they can't do their job because you don't show them, a CVD friendly report and, they can't do their job. And that's actually something as simple as changing the colors. You could potentially be liable in the future for stuff like that. And I see those type of cases coming because I see, lawyers chasing stuff like that. That's a whole nother spectrum to chase and make money. So to hedge this bet, what you don't want to do is to be the person who developed that report that got the company sued for $10 million. Right? I mean,
that wasn't me. That was the last guy.
And, that could be, that's stretching it, right? That's a extreme outlier.
Sure.
But the possibility exists. So just to prevent it, let's include them anyway. Because then too, you never know who you're affecting. If you can make somebody's day by including them without actively going out and searching them, that makes somebody feel good. And at the end of the day, if you can help somebody out, that's what them anyway. Because then too, you never know who you're affecting. If you can make somebody's day by including them without actively going out and searching them, that makes somebody feel good. And at the end of the day, if you can help somebody out, that's what it's all about anyway, right? So 5 more minutes of your time to help include somebody who has CVD, that's cool.
That person that you're helping out by making it look good for the colorblind is maybe the decision maker on whether you come back for that next project as a consultant.
Definitely. Yeah.
That can make a big difference to your future as well, or my future.
Right.
So what are some of the tools doing to help us with some of that? Right. Again, I'm a lazy knuckle dragging Neanderthal, right? I want kind of out of the box to be that way. What are the tools doing to help me there?
I'm interested to see, how Power BI is going to directly address that. One of the things that you can do right now in like Excel and PowerPoint and, in Power BI as well, you can change gradients and stuff like that. So, right now it's, you got to actively be thinking about it, so see in the future, having a switch that if you had CBD, you could hit the switch and then it would change for you. That probably makes a lot of sense to do something like that. That's your easy button, right? I don't know if they're going to do that, but I could see them doing that because that's simple. They could say for this color, this RGB color, we could show this color, because they have the budget to delve into that and to be able to figure out what works for who and what works for not. So I could see them doing something like that in the future.
Right. Yeah, just translating that. So if they do have the different colors, like you mentioned, the red and greens, right? They just translate to, gradients of, or shades of, I don't know, blue or whatever.
Because, the nature of, the Power BIs and the Tableaus, stuff like that. And then with the, the HTML5 enable you to do stuff on the fly, I could see it just being a quick button to let you change, a styling sheet or something like that that changes the colors on the fly. Obviously, a reporting service report is static. It wouldn't be able to do that. But the new HTML5 reports would be able to do that. You know what I mean? So I can see that coming in the future. We don't know yet, but they're actively working on.
Again, kind of data everywhere, right? And, SQL Server 2016, the integration with, Power BI and mobile reports, right? And so we may already feel like there's enough reports out there, but it seems like that's only going to expand. You mentioned the dangers of datafication. You feel like the role of reporting and the need to go through this is just expanding? We're just now starting to kind of get into some of this?
Oh, yeah. This is the forefront of it. Like, everything, we're datafying everything. We datafy everything from our footsteps to our calories to our heart rate to, traffic on the road. We datafy everything because we like to be able to see and analyze things. We want a quick answer. We want to be able to say, oh, I did this. And it's good, though. It lets us make changes and decisions. We can plan. They're using it to be able to track diseases. They can track the spread of the Zika virus using data. That's some amazing stuff you can do. But there's dangers in that, though. There's extreme dangers in that. We need to be careful, especially with us being the people that are actually showing the data. Because I'll give you two quick examples, too. One is a mechanical issue and the other one is a human issue. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, with us being data professionals, we love the term, garbage in, garbage out. We live by that.
Right.
And so thinking along that, I'm actually writing a blog post about it now. So the story will be in there as well. I had a client that was a retail client and they would track store attendance. And as every time somebody came in and out, it would track and count. So they would know how many people came in and out of the store. They would base stuff on, store bonuses and stuff like that based on that number there. And they would base, even their financials was based on attendance in the store because they could do, store attendance divided by sales and all kind of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But as I was working on one of the analytical project there, I was interviewing one of the business people and I was interviewing the business people in general. And I began to hear them call it the random number generator. And I was like, what? But it was known that the numbers were wrong and it was a joke. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. You're basing your business on something you know is wrong. They're like, yeah, we know it's wrong. Like, that's not a problem. So everything they were doing in the future was based on this incorrect, assumption. So the analytics was right. The visualization was right, but the source was wrong. So you had garbage on the end because your source was wrong. So that's one of the dangers is having an incorrect source, having low quality input. The other one is the human factor. And, this is a little touchy because of, how it transpired out, but we'll use the election. One of the things that we saw up until the point of the election, a week before the election, most major polls showed Hillary Clinton winning between 3 to 6%, points.
Right. And,
it was okay. That was great. And she had based the fact that she didn't even have a concession speech because the number said she could not lose. Obviously, we know how that went out. So the first thing that went back to everybody was like, oh, the polls are wrong. The polls are garbage. Right. And so that reflects back on people like us writing the report. Right. So that'd be the analog of, we wrote the report wrong. No, we didn't write the report wrong. The data came in wrong. And, what ended up happening was it's called social desirability bias. People say stuff that they think you want to hear, not what they're really going to do. People were saying that they were going to vote for her when obviously they didn't. But like I said, we won't go into that. That's also psychology as well. I told you I'm a psychology junkie. But but even with that though, too, people knew, okay, we collected the data, they did the full random sampling. You have places like the Gallup poll and USA Today poll. So they're doing all the stuff statistically correct. They're doing the proper distribution of people, the proper distribution of, the population to be able to get exactly what's needed to be able to give accurate results and stuff like that. They go through, do all this, have the proper, margin of error, everything, right? And then they show, okay, 3 to 6%, she should win. Okay, great. Let's work on that. And then that doesn't end up happening because the source was wrong. And so, one of the things I want to caution is, as data professionals, we need to make sure that we're comfortable in our source. Is our source correct? Was there a bias in collecting it? Was there, errors in the machine that collected it? Was there possibility of errors coming in? Was the data corrupted coming in? Or,
are we looking for the number that will help us prove our point rather than looking at the numbers a little more objectively to help us answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. And that's a great way to put it. And that's another bias. Are we using the numbers to prove our bias, or are we using the numbers to, disprove our bias and to show, the proper thing? Because like you said, they were using the numbers to prove their bias, right? Because they wanted her to win. So the numbers prove that. So that works. Let's go with it. Right. What nobody ever said was, are people truthfully telling the story that's actually happening? Are they truthfully going to vote for her?
Man. Oh, some interesting stuff. And obviously, I think this is not going to go away, right? The reporting options are not decreasing that are available to us. And so I think it will be kind of interesting to see how some of this plays out. I'm interested to start playing with even some of the color blindness components, because when I heard those numbers, I thought, wow, that is much higher than I would have guessed.
One of the things too, with the influx of data and how ubiquitous it's going to become, I can see these principles being used for everybody from the administrative assistant to executive director and the CEO and stuff like that, because everybody at some point is going to become natural to be creating reports. We need to make sure, are we comfortable in the source? It's not going to just be us creating them in the future. As more and more self-service tools come out, the iPhone 15 is going to have a way to show reports of your tweets and stuff in real time. Facebook's going to be like, hey, show my data. I can see that. That's coming because it's just the next natural evolution of it.
Right.
Because as more and more people understand how valuable data is, the more and more people are going to want to show their data. More and more people are going to want to show, what they're doing with their data. You're going to want to say, think about it. Even your Fitbit.
Sure.
You got your own reports that you can share with your friends. Look, I had 10,000 steps today. I'm averaging 9,200 steps, a week,
right.
Stuff like that. So even though the small stuff, even now we're beginning to see people wanting to show their own data. So it's just going to get more and more in the future as we get further along, to electric cars and stuff like that,
Yeah, so that's an interesting point, right? And I think, ultimately as data professionals, we can continue to provide value there if we're willing to educate people on how to do that, right? And do the best practices rather than I am the creator of the reports. It's here's some guidance on how to do that.
Right. And I think that's the big thing at the end of the day is willing to seek control for the greater good. Because at the end of the day, you're more valuable when you provide true benefit to the enterprise than just, I created this. If you can show more people to do it better, because you're a bottleneck. No matter how good, you and me, we're bottlenecks.
Right.
But if 10 of us can do it, then we're better, so that's how I see that.
The value there, again, is in understanding the data and kind of where it comes from. And then the presentation, that's like the final piece. You can push that down a little bit and just have that, be taken off.
That oftentimes the visualizations or the reports that are shown will drive behavior. And when you're asking someone to build a report that's going to drive behavior, oftentimes they don't always have the complete understanding of that behavior. And I think that goes back to what Jonathan said in the beginning around a story, building a story and storyboard. But if that's pushed out to everyone's able to get to the data and build their own visualizations, then people really have to build their own stories in that case so that they're showing the right data. Otherwise, you're going to end up with data that's driving business decisions that's all over the spectrum. One person's report may contradict another's based off of their biases or approach to creating that.
And another thing, too, with reports, this is something that I learned a long time ago, too, is that a report doesn't have to answer a question. Sometimes a report may pose more questions, which eventually leads you to the direct answer. Because that's something that I think that a lot of us do, is that we want a report to solve a problem. Reports don't always have to solve a problem. They can lead to more questions. And that's progress. And I think that a lot of us do is that we want a report to solve a problem. Reports don't always have to solve a problem. They can lead to more questions. And that's progress. So it's thinking about it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love with reports is when somebody looks at it and they'll say, well, why is that number that way? And then you have to go do the research and figure out, oh, well, it's because sales are off in that region or whatever it may be. And then you're able to fix a business problem because of those questions that came up.
As a consultant, when I'm talking to clients, that's what I tell them too, is don't be afraid to have your results pose more questions. I said, because that's good. You're getting further into your data. You're learning more about yourself. Everything doesn't have to have a quick answer. That's our microwave society. We want quick answers, but everything doesn't have a quick answer.
Well, awesome. Jonathan, thank you for the discussion.
Yes, thank you. I enjoy it. I love talking about stuff like this. And you get me to geek out for hours on psychology and stuff like that.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Should we go ahead and do SQL Family?
Sure. That was weird.
Started with SQL Server.
I had a funny story with that. I was working on the help desk, and I was trying to figure out what I want. I knew I wanted a career in IT because I wrote my first program when I was 6 years old. I was one of those weird kids. I had a Radio Shack TRS-80. I'm taking it back, right? Showing my age. So at 6 years old, I wrote my first program. So I had been doing IT stuff all through school and stuff like that. And then got a job on the help desk. And I knew that that wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I would begin to research and end up finding, I was like, okay, I think this database thing is kind of cool. So I went and sought out the DBA at the company. And I worked second shift. He worked the regular 8 to 5. So I would come in every day at 8 o'clock and sit with him until I had to work at 2 to learn SQL Server from him. He was willing to his name was Carlos too, which is funny. And,
Great name.
Yeah. And he was willing to sit with me and teach me SQL Server. And that was SQL Server 6 and 6.5. That's taking it back too. They saw that, my drive and determination in 6.5. That's taking it back too. They saw that, my drive and determination with that, and ended up creating me a junior DBA role. And that was my first job as a true SQL Server professional. I was a junior DBA at that company. That's how I got started. That was my first, exposure to SQL Server. And ever since then, I've just loved SQL Server. So I've been doing it so if I tell you how many years, you know how old I am. So 17 years later, this is where we are today.
That's impressive, going out of your way to work the extra hours just so you can learn something new.
Right.
If more people did that, I think we'd be in a whole different world.
Not the typical path, right? Where it's kind of falling into your lap, which happened with me. It's more of, hey, that's pretty cool. Let me go check that out. Now, in all that time with SQL Server, if there's one thing that you could change about SQL Server, what would it be?
The one thing I would change is that they're actually changing it. It was, the staticness between versions and fixing things. We went through that whole, the dead zone. That was like, oh my God, trying to figure out, and, professionals found solutions around problems. But that was one of the biggest things, between there and there. And then 2012 to 2014, okay, that's cool. But to see them, how fast they're changing stuff, like VNext is in CTP 1.1 now? Is that what it is?
Yeah,
they're at the rate where they could possibly even release, VNext this year. That's crazy. And that was actually one of my things was to be able to make changes faster on the fly as the community and, the users would say, hey, do this, can you do that? We're getting updates for Power BI. It seems like every week. It seems like every time I open up Management Studio, there's another update for that. So they're doing the things that I would like them to change. And it's literally changed faster. And so that's really cool to see. It's exciting. I can't wait to see the future. I mean, imagine SQL Server with the changes they're making now in just, 3 years. It's going to be amazing what's coming. So for me, the best piece of career advice is based on, for me, I had struggled personally in just being comfortable in who I am. And I remember one of my managers, his name was Keith. And me and Keith are still real good friends. I talk to him all the time and stuff too. Keith told me, he's like, just embrace who you are, be who you are, don't try to be somebody else. And what's funny is that that's actually the beginning of my logo. You guys see my logo. It's my hair. That's me literally embracing myself. That was the best piece of advice that I got, because once I truly began to embrace who I am, my strengths and my weaknesses, instead of trying to fit into a box that I thought somebody else wanted me to be, that's when I began to flourish. And that's when I became truly happy. I'm truly happy because I'm being who I am. So I love to share. I love to talk. I love to teach. But, and just embracing who I am. And that's the best piece of advice I could give back is to somebody else. Tell them, doesn't matter who you are, whether you're short, tall, and that'll be your gift. That'll be what people gravitate towards you.
No, that's right. That whole idea about networking, kind of finding your own people, I think all too often, we come out of college and it's like, well, I need a job, right? So I'll go anywhere. If we can identify what it is that we want to do or places we want to go after. I mean, a la even this idea of the color blindness and making reports better to help that segment that kind of speaks to the work that you want to do. And then it's just a matter of finding where that's important to other people as well.
Yeah. Right. Definitely. I think that's even, I can see people even taking that project and running with it, selling that service to a business. Hey, we can convert your reports to, so there's an idea for somebody if they want to take that and run with it. You can sell that service.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So
our last question for you today, Jonathan, if you could have one superhero power, what would it be and why do you want it?
So my favorite superhero doesn't even have any superpowers, right? Can you guess?
I was going to say Batman.
It's Batman. Yeah. So, and what I've always loved about him is, the Detective Comics, because he used his mind and that was his superpower. And, he just outsmarted people. Obviously he was physically fit. Right. So there's that. So, sure. But I mean, it was, the ability to get to the, in depth of stuff. Like I love that investigative, and that's kind of like what I like to do anyway. Right. Get to the problem, get to the root problem, figure out what's really going on. So like, if anything, I would want to be just Batman, right? I don't need super speed and super strength. Nah, I just like the super mind and call it a day.
The other cool thing with Batman is he had pretty much unlimited budget, and he had all the toys and tools and gadgets that he wanted to do whatever he needed to. That'd
true.
Be a lot of fun.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Yes. So I guess you could say that's also superpower too, right? The unlimited money.
Yep.
Right. So
having a keen business sense, or at least having a dad maybe who had one.
That would definitely help.
Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for being with us today. We do appreciate it.
Yeah, once again, I thank both of you guys. This has been an honor to be able to do this. I'd like to thank the community for even, having you guys available to do this. So I look forward to what's coming in the future. Look forward to seeing you guys again at a SQL Saturday, being on another panel and stuff too. And I thank you for the opportunity and the time, and you guys have a great day.
Yep. Thanks, Jonathan. It's been great.
So it's interesting, Steve, as we were talking, and I didn't bring up in the conversation, but as he was talking about visualizations and again, the spectrums of reds and greens, I couldn't help but think about the database health monitor dashboard. And we're using some reds and greens in there. And I thought, oh man, maybe we should take a look there and see if there's some things that we can change.
Well, I'll tell you, Carlos, you should have seen the earlier versions of it. There were some really color challenges early on. So if anybody's having trouble with Database Health Monitor on that point with color issues around any type of color blindness, please let me know. I'd love to have your input there, and we can take a look and see what we can do to make that better for you.
Right. I mean, I thought it was interesting that we kind of take for granted, because we don't suffer from color blindness, and we don't really give it much thought. I was surprised at the numbers that he shared, particularly with men, and just that. Not that they're completely colorblind, but that they lose a spectrum or part of a spectrum.
Right.
And how many people are just kind of dealing with it, and that's just kind of life. And, in IT, it would be interesting to get some numbers behind how many people actually have trouble viewing some of those reports and just don't say anything because they, it might be perceived as a nuance or a nuisance rather, and them making a big deal.
Yeah, definitely a good point there. I think that we all need to be doing what we can to make our reports, our products, everything better so that everyone has a fair chance of using it. Our products, everything better so that everyone has a fair chance of using it.
Right. And I'm hoping that those tools become better. And one, I guess, so knowing that this is a problem is part of it. But then also I'm hoping that the tools will help us do a little bit better job of just making that transition easy so that it's, I'll just say, the less of a burden. That might sound a little bit harsh, but that idea of making that as easy as possible. But again, just being aware of it is a good start.
Yep. And I think that, Jonathan did a really good job sort of giving the overview and bringing this all across. So definitely enjoyed the conversation there.
That's right. So one of the things we want to talk about is who we're talking with next week.
Oh, yes. Next week is Kathy Kellenberger, and the topic is the Microsoft MVP program and her experiences with that.
That's right. So that's going to be a little bit of a tough conversation, I think. But interesting to know kind of what goes in that, if you're knowing a little bit more about that program, what it takes to get in, if you will, and then what some of the benefits are. That's what we're going to be talking about with Kathy next week.
Yep. Okay,
well, I think that's going to do it for this week. Thanks again for tuning in. Our music for SQL Server in the News is by Mansardian, used under Creative Commons.
The other music credit we should probably give is to the SQL Server radio guys. And
that's right. That's true.
To Homer McEwen, whose music we included on the show as well.
That's right. And those links to all of that will be available on the show notes link or the show notes page for today's episode at SQLDataPartners.com/visualization. And this is episode 83. So however you want to go about finding that, the links will be there. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, of course, you can reach out to us. You can use the hashtag SQL Podcast or reach out to us directly. I am Carlos L. Chacon.
And I'm on Twitter on SQL EMT. We'll see you on the SQL Trail.
SQL data.